on ET Now is Deepak Shenoy, the founder and CEO of Capital Mind. Mr. Shenoy, good evening. This is Ruchi Bhatia. Thank you very much for taking your time out and speaking with us. Let me first begin by asking you on the developments over last evening and of course today at Zee's AGM. I saw your tweet and you said that they were pretty interesting. How do you make, what do you make of the developments over last evening and of course today that we've seen at the company?
Thanks, Ruchi, first for having me on the show. This is actually an interesting development because Oppenheimer has owned a significant chunk of shares in the company for a few years now, and we know that now the promoters own only 4% or so. And one of the reasons why they lost so much of their shareholding was that they had so much debt in their in the promoter companies that they had to sell their stake in Zee in order to be able to bail out their own promoter companies by the cash that they generated. And since then, the shareholders, though they owned the majority, they let the management run as before, and there have at least been one instance where there's been a dramatic increase in salary of one of the promoters, which is perceived to be the reason why the shareholders have demanded, that the directors be changed, and also the current managing director also will have to be changed, which is they've put this clause in. It's interesting because Zee's share went up quite dramatically on the back of that, because perhaps the market feels that the current management, a change of current management would actually realize even better value for Zee shareholders. So quite interesting from the angle of saying, at one end you've got shareholder activism, on the other hand the share price is going up quite dramatically.
Right. Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, while we're talking about the EGM, and of course the date for the EGM is yet to come out, today at the annual general meeting, we heard Punit Goenka saying that appropriate action will be taken. Is it really then a given that the EGM, whenever it happens, will happen according to the rule book? What can really, really go about in the boardroom when the EGM, of course, does take place?
The EGM will actually be an all shareholders meeting, which includes a vote. So if it does happen, they have yet to announce it, although some shareholders have called for it. It's not apparent that the EGM will actually be called for, so that will go through a bit of legal wrangling here and there, especially if the current set of directors, the managing directors, to be voted out. One of the things that has happened, and this has happened in 2019, for instance, that after this situation of the shares being sold or shares being taken over by Oppenheimer and so on, there was, I think, an intercorporate deposit that has been written off, which was given to one of the other businesses that had a promoter ownership as well, where I think there was basically a 170 crore or so of write-off that has happened from the Zee books to some of the promoter companies. There have been other instances of such, promoter companies or other group-related companies having been lent money by the Zee, which is a debt-free company for the most part. So this has actually an implication, because now what happens going forward is that they may not allow such transactions to happen or to take place, because there seems to be a lack of trust between the majority shareholders or some of the larger shareholders and the current management, even if the rule of if the AGM does not take place.
Right. Mr. Shenoy, before I let you go, what do you make of the recent rise in awareness by shareholders and shareholder and investor activism that we are seeing across a slew of listed companies of late?
To be honest, it's quite refreshing. We've not seen, so like to give you an example of what has happened before with the same promoters of Zee, is that when mutual funds who had given the promoter companies loans against the collateral of Zee shares in the past, they did not choose to kind of exercise their rights to be able to sell these shares in the market, and instead made a deal with the promoters that the money would be returned. It was, of course, returned, and one of the reasons why the promoters had to sell to Oppenheimer was that. But that was the sign of non-shareholder activism, in the sense they did not exercise their rights. But now we're seeing funds exercise their rights. We're seeing investor advisory services put out specific reasons why, and we've seen this in iShare as well, where there was a lack of continuation of the CEO because of some shareholders voting against it, and perhaps this gives the reason why these AGMs will no longer be a walkthrough. In the sense, they will not be like resolutions just passed summarily, and they will be more discussion. There needs to be more discussion and more pressure for the management or the directors to actually please shareholders in order to be able to have resolutions passed. Earlier it was a given. So I like this phenomenon.
Right.
Sorry.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Mr. Shenoy, given the fact that you're saying for managements, for boards, any kind of resolution is not just going to fly through. It's not going to be a cakewalk for them. There is a need for more active discussion with shareholders, your stakeholders as well. Is this really then, a new chapter in terms of corporate governance that we are seeing for a lot of the listed companies?
We've seen boardroom battles before. We've seen this in L&T in the 1980s. We've seen this in the 90s also. We've seen this boardroom kind of battles, large shareholders taking large positions in stocks. Recently, Mindtree saw a shareholder come in and do a hostile takeover as well. So there are lots of new things that are happening, but lots of the older things that used to happen in the past as well, including voting and resolution corrections, are currently getting exaggerated. Also because now people are a lot more rules have come in where this voting happens online. A lot of people are, if they're no longer physically able to visit an AGM, they can still vote for a resolution or against it. Shareholder voting, we're seeing much more activity because of availability of information and availability of the resources to be able to vote for it. This has happened over the last few years. I actually congratulate SEBI for pushing a lot of this through as well. And I believe that this is positive for the industry, although there may be some, overreaching or overreach in terms of shareholder activism as well. I believe that over time that will settle and we will get a much better system than we have currently.
Right. Okay, all right. On that note, Mr. Shenoy, I appreciate you taking your time out and speaking with us.